All right, let's jump right in and step into the 18th century, an era of incredible wigs, razor-sharp wit, and, believe it or not, intense intellectual warfare. This wasn't just a time of social change, this was a battle for the very soul of society, and it was fought on the pages of its most brilliant and sometimes scathing literature. So, let's pull back the curtain on this fascinating time.
And to kick things off, let's start with a question that sounds, well, a little weird. How on earth did something as silly as a stolen lock of hair become the topic of one of the most important poems of an entire century? Well, the answer gets right to the heart of the neoclassical age and its bizarre, totally fascinating obsessions.
But before we get to the hair, we really need to get our heads around the philosophy that was driving this entire period. You see, this wasn't just some random moment in history. Oh no, it was a deliberate, conscious attempt to force logic and structure onto a world that had just been through absolute chaos.
And that phrase, reverence for classical ideals, that is everything. For the thinkers of this age, ancient Greece and Rome weren't just history. They were like the ultimate instruction manual for building a perfect society, one based on stability and pure logic. This meant that everything, from poetry to politics to how you acted at a party, was supposed to be governed by reason with a capital R, by order, and by a sharp, cutting wit.
Now, this age of reason wasn't one monolithic thing. It actually evolved over more than 100 years. It kicks off with the Restoration, then hits its absolute peak of rational obsession during what's called the Augustan Age. And then you can see it starts to soften a bit, moving into the Age of Sensibility, where, emotion starts to creep back into the picture. And trust me, that shift, it's going to be super important later on.
But for all this talk of order, society itself was anything but. See, beneath that polished surface, there was this massive cultural war brewing, a real tug-of-war between the old, fancy aristocracy and the brand-new, up-and-coming middle class. And this fight wasn't happening on a battlefield. It was happening inside the era's most popular books.
And this slide just lays out the two opposing teams perfectly. On one side, you've got the aristocratic world, and its hero is Belinda from The Rape of the Lock. Her whole world? The drawing room. What does she care about? Leisure, her reputation, and fancy social rituals. But then, on the other side, you've got the new hero of the middle class, Robinson Crusoe. His arena is a desert island, and his values are all about hard work, self-reliance, and cold, hard logic.
So, in this quote, the poet Alexander Pope is describing his heroine, Belinda, getting ready for a party. But he does it with all the epic grandeur of a Greek hero preparing for war. These tiny air spirits, he calls them sylphs, are like her personal armorers. It's both hilarious and just a brutal takedown of a world where getting your hairstyle perfect was treated like a matter of cosmic importance.
So this whole aristocratic code, it was all a performance. Your reputation was everything. And that's exactly why stealing a lock of hair could be treated with the seriousness of the Trojan War. That's a classic technique called mock heroic, where you use this epic, over-the-top language for something totally silly. Pope was basically using wit to show just how absurd their priorities had become.
Okay, so while the aristocrats are busy playing card games and gossiping, a completely different kind of hero was taking shape in the pages of Daniel Defoe's novels, a hero built for the modern world.
Robinson Crusoe basically represented a whole new gospel. First up, individualism. Your success comes from what you do, not who your dad was. Then there's rationality. Crusoe doesn't just survive, he thrives by making lists, building fences, and methodically solving every problem. And finally, commerce. His first instinct isn't to look at nature and be amazed, it's to master it, tame it, and figure out how to make it profitable. He is the ultimate self-made man.
So you've got this major clash of values, right? And all that tension created a lot of hypocrisy and corruption that writers were just itching to call out. They found the perfect tool for the job. Because in this age, literature wasn't just for fun. No, it was a weapon. And that weapon was satire.
Right, so the whole point of satire, it's not just to get a laugh out of you. It's designed to make you uncomfortable. It uses humor to expose hypocrisy and force you, the reader, to confront some pretty ugly truths about society. Think of it like a moral sneak attack disguised as a joke.
And satire was the absolute perfect weapon for this era. Why? Well, first, writers felt they had a moral duty to teach and to correct society. Second, it was the best way to highlight the massive gap between the ideal of a rational, orderly society and the often corrupt, messy reality. And finally, it was sharp, it was current, and it was perfect for being read and argued about in the new coffee houses, which were basically the social media of the 18th century.
And if you want to see just how powerful and utterly shocking this weapon could be, you don't have to look any further than Jonathan Swift's masterpiece of outrage, A Modest Proposal.
Just let that sink in for a second. Swift, writing in this calm, rational tone like he's a modern economist, suggests that the starving Irish should solve all their economic problems by selling their children as food to the rich English landlords. Yeah, it's absolutely horrifying.
But of course, that was the entire point. By taking the cold, dehumanizing logic of the time to its most insane, stomach-turning conclusion, Swift forced his readers to confront the actual cruelty of English policy in Ireland. He was basically using satire to scream from the rooftops that, behind the polite veneer of reason and economics, real people were suffering.
Now, this battle of ideas wasn't just happening in pamphlets, it was playing out live on stage, too. The theater became this huge battleground over a really simple question about comedy. What was a comedy for? Was it supposed to make you laugh at how foolish people are, or should it make you weep for how good they can be?
And while the two sides could not have been more different, you had sentimental comedy, which wanted to make you cry with joy at the sight of pure, rewarded virtue. It believed people were basically good. But then you had anti-sentimental comedy, which wanted to make you laugh your head off at hypocrisy. Its message was that people are often ridiculous, and the best way to fix them is to expose them with wit.
And this table just pits the two big plays against each other perfectly. Steele's play, The Conscious Lovers, has a hero who is so morally perfect he makes your teeth ache. The villain is just bad luck. But Sheridan's The School for Scandal is a direct attack on that whole idea. The villain isn't bad luck, it's the hypocrite who pretends to be a man of feeling, while the real hero is the witty, flawed, but ultimately honest guy. Sheridan's whole point was that real comedy needs judgment. It needs a bite. It's not just about getting out the handkerchiefs.
Okay, so we've got all these debates raging in poetry and novels on the stage, but where were people actually having these conversations? To wrap this all up, let's talk about two guys who didn't just write for their age, they basically invented the very media that defined it.
This is where Joseph Addison and Richard Steele come in. Before them, most public writing was either dense political pamphlets or, religious sermons. They came along and invented something totally new, the short, witty, daily essay written for a general audience. Periodicals like The Tatler and The Spectator weren't just new magazines. What they were doing was basically inventing modern journalism as we know it.
And this quote from Addison just captures their mission perfectly. I mean, their whole goal was to take these huge ideas about morality, art, and philosophy out of the dusty old libraries and put them right into the hands of ordinary people who were just hanging out, drinking coffee and tea. They were, in a way, democratizing the intellectual life of the nation.
And their legacy is just immense. They didn't just invent a new way of writing. What they really did was create a shared national conversation. They made being virtuous and well-read fashionable for the growing middle class. They set the standard for clear, elegant English writing and pretty much invented popular literary criticism, shaping what people read and how they talked about it for a century to come.
And that's where we land. The neoclassical era called itself the Age of Reason, an age that prized order above everything else. But as we've seen, its most powerful, most lasting contributions, they all came from conflict, from critique, from the brilliant, chaotic art of satire. Which really makes you wonder, right? Was its true genius not in finding order, but in mastering the tools to expose all the disorder hiding just beneath the surface?